Welcome to your key discovery point. I am Brett Burney from Nextpoint, joined by Doug Austin of eDiscovery today. Doug, I feel like we have to add a disclaimer to the beginning of our videos now. We are real humans recording a real video. This is not a deep fake. Of course, I guess if we were deep fakes, that's what we would say, right?
Yeah, of
But
course. Yeah.
if it was a deep fake offered as evidence in court, how would people deal with that? You wrote an article about a paper where Maura Grossman and Judge Grimm have proposed some changes to the federal rules of evidence on how courts can address AI generated evidence, or sometimes we just call them deep fakes. What an incredibly important topic here, Doug. And I'm so glad that number one, that you brought a lot of people's attention to this paper. Obviously, we all know Maura Grossman and Judge Grimm very well, very active and very studious in their approaches to a lot of things in our neck of the woods and e-discovery here. And it's just great that at least there's some kind of motion happening here on how courts can, how courts can get a little help on understanding how to juggle this increasingly important topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, well, let's face it. If Grossman and Grimm are going to write something, I'm going to cover it because it's
You're
usually
going
going
to
to be
cover it,
important.
right?
But this one, as obviously they have been talking about, issues tying to this and other papers, and certainly if you did a search like for Grossman or Grimm, you could on eDiscovery today, you'd find some of the other papers that they've written about this topic,
Right.
about AI and about deepfakes and what have you. The interesting thing is kind of the title here. Acknowledged and unacknowledged AI generated evidence.
Right.
Because one of the things we're going to see, of course, is there's going to be evidence that will be acknowledged AI generated evidence, and that's going to be becoming common as AI is generating so much content. But then there's going to be the unacknowledged AI generated evidence, which are the deepfakes. And that's the thing
Hmm.
that I think we're looking at. So, I think one of the things that's interesting to, about the paper is talking about kind of, what to expect. And of course, Grossman and Grimm have proposed some rules changes to the federal rules of evidence, which are down there, as
Yep,
you
here
you
they
know
are.
you've shown there. Proposed new rule 901C, um, and then proposed changes to 901B9. And kind of what I did try to do is highlight some of the kind of the considerations of those two rules changes. But a couple of other things that I think is notable about the paper. One is they talked about the difficulty for identifying deepfakes. And
Hmm.
when they did that, I wrote about it a little bit up above. And to me, one of the things that it's kind of a catch-22 where basically you've got to you got to kind of get the jury to look at it to determine whether it's they should disregard it or not. But that's easier said than done. So it's a bit of a catch-22. And one of the things that I did after, kind of reading that and putting that together is I thought I knew there had to be some sites out there that were like based on the ability to spot a deep fake. So
Oh, yeah.
I wrote a follow-up post later that day where I got into that and actually went through three of them basically where I took my own tests to see if I could detect fakes in these sites. Now the first one there, the detect fake site, as you and I noted, I was running into some kind of anomalies there that weren't reproducing when I was just doing it now. But in essence, what it does is it gives you images, and you have to determine whether it's real or fake, and takes you through that process. And honestly, they're really difficult to determine which
Yeah.
are real or fake. And ultimately, I think I got something like 15 out of essentially 30 out of 50 because it was giving me the image twice and scoring it twice, although it wasn't
Oh,
always giving
okay.
me credit for both right answers or giving me one credit for two wrong answers. So it was very weird. So the
This is
basically,
fun
I
though.
got
I
about
just have to
half of them
yeah.
right. Well, I'm sorry.
I have to say thank you for, wasting several minutes of my day today because I looked at some of these sites that you had linked to, Doug, and it's like you can't stop. Like I want to keep going. Like, can I do it or not? And
Right.
underlying this, obviously, that was a little fun because it is important today, I think, and becoming increasingly important that I don't know that. I guess society should have some kind of a comfort level with being able to identify real pictures versus deepfakes because they're just getting better and better. But that underscores the issue, of course, that Grossman and Grimm were talking about from this aspect of can a jury even make that acknowledgement if it is something
Right.
that can they agree that amongst the 6 or 12 of them or whatever that this is an authentic picture or it's not an authentic picture? And then what do
Mhm.
you do from that point too?
Right. Well, and so a couple of things that I think, and I've been saying this for some time, and I think they've also kind of talked about it, even though there's nothing that's really foolproof. I think what's going to become more important is the form of the data and the metadata associated with that,
Yes,
because
right.
it's going to be those are going to be some of the clues, especially as the images and the videos continue to get better and better to a point where I don't think visually you'll be able to tell. And certainly, with the test I did, I only got them about half right, half the time. And honestly, I think several of my right answers were pure guesses. So it's hard to do it based on visual. So you need the data, underlying data, to help you with that. But I think one other aspect that they, kind of concluded their paper with is the recommendations. If you go down to the bottom, toward the bottom of the blog post, a little
Hmm.
further than that.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah. Where they were providing some recommendations and suggestions about what lawyers and courts should do.
Yeah, these are
And,
great.
talk about things like early anticipation and planning and kind of starting to prepare for AI generated evidence. Talk about it in discovery, talk about how it's handled, potential protective orders. I think it's going to increase the use of expert witnesses to help provide testimony on the authenticity of evidence. So I think and then of course motions practice to resolve evidentiary
Hmm.
issues when related to AI evidence. So all these are things that I think are definitely great recommendations to think about, and I think that's one of the entire paper is terrific as always, but the
Yeah,
recommendations at the end, because as they noted, while they suggested rules changes and some others have too. They say the
right,
earliest we could expect to see them is 2027, but more
right.
realistically, it's going to be like 2029. So we're a few years away from rules having any impact. And in the meantime, you've got to have some ways of dealing with all this AI generated evidence that's going to be continuing to build.
I mean, that's almost the scary part of this all. I love these suggestions that they have. I'm a big fan of making some changes to the federal rules of evidence, but just like we've even gone through several changes with the federal rules of civil procedure, like it takes such a long time. Who knows what is going to be different and how much better some of these AI generated evidence is going to be in 2027, even next month for crying out loud, not to
Oh,
mention
sure.
2027 or 2029. And it's just like, well, we kind of have to fit that under the same umbrella today of federal rules of evidence that we've been dealing with for decades, right? And it's just there's
Mhm.
going to be so many changes. Anyway, that's a little unfortunate from my perspective, but it is the reality of what we have to deal with. And I'm just glad and thrilled, of course, that there are folks like Grossman and Grimm that are at least discussing this right now. We always talk about Gen AI, and so many people talk about it from the technology side, as in like how can that help in a document review, Doug? But I like this because we're looking at the other flip side of this is can people use Gen AI tools to create evidence that in this case, and I also like this distinction. We don't need to get into it right now, but the acknowledged, generative AI tools, evidence versus unacknowledged, because there's people that are
Hmm.
going to be throwing something in from an evidentiary standpoint that they may know that they generated with an AI
Right.
tool, but they're not acknowledging it or they're not admitting that that
Right.
was. So
Well,
anyway,
and
just
one
so
of
many
the
things. Yeah, go ahead.
And oh yeah, sorry. And one of the things back toward the top of the blog post, I linked to a case that I covered last year,
Yeah.
where basically the was the voice cloning case, where essentially the former high school athletic director was accused then and has now been convicted of using an AI generated voice to frame the school principal saying anti-Semitic remarks. And so he was ultimately removed from his position. He had
Wow.
to, he had obviously safety concerns at home and things like that. And this is evidence that ultimately, when they got down to it, they were able to determine this was a deep faked audio clip. That ultimately what became the focus of the case. But
Right.
this is the type of thing that can happen, and obviously you're going to see more and more of this type of stuff where people are going to put things out there, and you have to begin to wonder, well, is this a deep fake or not?
Great stuff as always, Doug. Thanks for linking to this. I think this is fantastic for somebody to read any aspect of litigation, just to start understanding sort of this judicial approach to AI generated evidence and how the courts can handle it. If you want a little bit of maybe a little bit broader discussion, I'll put a link to one of our blog posts that I think we did about a year ago, which is the cute Chihuahua or blueberry muffin. Maybe some of this will give you an idea of some of the background of like hey, how AI can actually generate some of these images so well, and even some of the videos. So just like so many other folks, we've been talking about AI for quite a while here at Nextpoint, and this can give you some other additional links and stuff, to help you kind of understand that foundation. Ooh, interesting stuff, Doug. And as always, we appreciate your time and your coverage on this, and we'll talk with you next time.